Alright everybody, the time has come to finally doing a water change and some much needed plant grooming here in my 55-gallon Gourami tank. I almost feel like I can't call it my Gourami tank anymore. I'm down to one Gourami in it. At one point I had 6 or 7. But over the years, one by one, we've lost them, and it's still my Gourami tank even though we only have the one Moonlight Gourami in there now. At any rate, we just need to get in there and do a water change. I need to clean the filter out tonight, and we really need to get in here and start working on some of these plants. You can see my tiger lotus here. I won't really call it one of my problem plants because I love it. It's beautiful and it really does wonderful things in the tank. But it's definitely one of my high maintenance plants. It grows like a weed, and I've constantly got to get in there and trim that back. Or it just gets way up on the surface and it blocks a ton of light, and it just does, just too much in the tank, just too much coverage. So on this side of the tank, we've got my massive floating water sprite plant. This one I'm not going to remove in its entirety. The main mother plant, we'll call it, will stay in there. But what I'm going to do is get it in there, and you can see all these little babies it's got growing on it, and all these little root shoots coming off of it. You can see over here we've actually got full plants growing down into the tank. So a lot of those are going to get pulled out. I know there is the green cyanobacteria growing on this. Let's see if we can see some of it from the top. So what I plan on doing with a lot of this is moving it over to my 125. I've got a spotted tilapia in that tank that absolutely loves vegetation and has destroyed all the little bit of vegetation that was in that tank. And as a result, I can always add some more in there. Now if you look right up in there, you can see some of that sort of dark green stuff that lays in sheets. That's the cyanobacteria I'm talking about. So I will try to avoid as much of that as I can going over into the 125. But frankly, if it's in the tank, we're talking about a single-celled organism here, so if I pull any of these little plants out, there's no possibility that I'm going to be cyanobacteria free. My only hope is that if I put it over into the 125, it'll get devoured by the tilapia before it has a chance to really start growing or get established in there, whatever. I'm not going to do anything with the Java fern, and I don't think I'm going to do anything else in here other than maybe like wipe down the glass or something like that. We're not going to mess with any of the caves or any of the rock work or anything like that. I also don't think I'm going to video any of the process of cleaning out the filter or anything like that. We're just going to do a simple before and after, so consider this your before. And that's your after. So pretty uneventful water change. The filter was really filthy and dirty. I did get in and clean that all out. I even cleaned out some of the biomaterial that was in there, gave that a good rinse just to get it all free flowing again. I trimmed back the plants like I said I was going to. I really opened up the water sprite here on the left. It wound up not only being really thick and dense in the middle, but it had almost like a mat of that green cyanobacteria growing across the surface right above the root ball. So I had to trim a lot of the big branches off, or fronds if you will, and I removed a few that went down towards the left of the tank just to kind of open that up, and I removed a few that came towards the front of the tank, and that actually opens up and lets a lot more light get in, and we can see down here on the bottom much more clearly than we normally can in this tank. I also left a fair amount of the fronds growing off to the center of the tank, and there's lots of babies growing on that, so in time I'll be able to get in there and harvest some more out of there. And in the meantime, it gives me some nice surface cover, and that gives me that nice sort of verdant green glow in the tank that makes it look a lot more lush than it really is, and it just looks good all the way around. I also removed a bunch of the red tiger lotus, as I said I was going to, and I also removed a bunch of this Java fern up here in the corner. Some of the trailing tubers were moving towards the glass on the right hand side of the tank, and then some of those trailing roots that you can see were actually up and into my surface skimmer, and the surface skimmer had gunk growing on the surface of it, so we got in and sort of took care of all that and got it all cleaned out, so my surface skimmer's working well enough again. And I also took my spray bar in the back and I rolled it over so that instead of the jets squirting down the back of the tank like I used to have it, I've actually got the jets now mostly squirting upwards, and it still doesn't give me a lot of surface agitation per se, but compared to what used to be in this tank, that's actually quite a bit. So I don't have all the gouramis in here that I used to, and I've got a calm enough surface that the gourami will still certainly feel comfortable in this tank, but that just gives me a little bit more confidence that I'm going to get the proper amount of gas exchange that I need in this tank. It's so dense and thick, and there's so much growth in there that even with the power head and the filter circulating the water and everything, I really don't get a ton of water circulation in this tank. Believe it or not, I've got over, I'll say around 1,000 gallons per hour nominal. That's, with what everything's listed as. I've got at least 1,100 gallons per hour or something like that moving around in this tank. So it's probably not quite that much, but it's still significant. And yet you can hardly tell. The fish sit still, the vegetation barely moves, but if you look closely enough and if you look at the little bits of detritus moving around in there, you can actually see the water is moving around pretty good. The issue would be with the surface being too still, maybe covered with a biofilm, maybe too much plants growing across the surface. I ran into trouble like that in another one of my tanks, so I was getting a little bit nervous about that happening in this tank, so we got in there and we cleaned all that up and rolled that spray bar over, and everything looks pretty good now. So there's the final look at the tank. Thanks for watching. Hope you enjoyed it. Make sure you subscribe. That way you won't miss anything I got coming up. I do random videos of all kinds of different stuff. I basically just keep track of everything I do down here. So don't forget, this one is my Gourami tank. I'll see you real soon in the next one.